Okay, now this one is a little bit easier, I think. At least I hope it is. It seems to go a little bit faster, makes a little more sense. This is not LIFO, this is now weighted average. And I think it's actually the easiest of all of them, and probably the most accurate when you get right down to it. But same scenario, we've changed the cost now, I think, to $4. So it was $5, then it was $2, and now it's $4. This is our beginning balance. So what you'll have to do is just add this all up and get an average. So we had a beginning of $1,600, 400 times $4. We added purchases of 200 times 5 and 100 times 575, and that gave us purchases of $1,675. You add those two together, you get the available. Now just hang on there. Don't breathe. So, we are looking at finding the average cost of our available inventory. So we had $3,200, and all told there were 700 units. So if you take $3,275, divide it by 700, you end up with $4.68 per piece. So our ending inventory then was 550. Remember, we figured that. So we take 550 times 468 and come up with an ending inventory of 2574. Now we have all the numbers in place. So now we started with 1600, we added 1675, we add those together, and then we subtract the ending inventory and come up with a cost of goods sold of $701. You want to check that? We have 150 we sold times 468 comes to 702, and the difference is a rounding issue. So that is weighted average, and you can do this over here, but this pretty well tells you what's going on. Let's look at the moving one. It's a little more complicated, but it's not bad. It's really not bad. So let's look at, I need to make that just a tad smaller so you can see it all. There you go. So this time we've got what's on a running total. The other way was like a perpetual. You waited to the end and then you added it all up and came up with a weighted average. This is a moving, which is a perpetual. So we started with 400 at $4 each, 1,600. So we have 1,600 to begin with. We added 200 times 5.5, or $1,100. So what we do is we make another layer. We have 400 at 16, 200 at 1,100, and then we add those. So you have 600 here and 2,700 here. You divide the 2,700 by the 600, get an average, a weighted an average of how much those parts cost. So now we have 600 parts at $450, and they're worth $2,700. We then sold 150. Their cost was just $450, and that gave us $675 in the cost of goods sold. And then we added, and then we had to subtract. Okay, we had to take that out of inventory. So it's $450 at 4.5. And we had an ending inventory at that point of $2,025. Then we bought some more. And we bought 100, which makes us $550. And they cost $575. So we added that to the $225 and came up with $2,600 in inventory. So again, to find the moving cost here, you take $2,600 divided by 550, and you get $473 per unit. That gives us a cost of goods sold of $675 here, and an ending inventory of $2,600. So if you add this all up and make sure it's right, you got $1,600, you got $1,675, you subtract the $675, you come up with $2,600 in ending inventory. So now we're going to do May. And May, I'm just going to transfer these numbers down into May. So this is our beginning. And we bought some. We bought 250 at 550. So I add that 250 to the 550 and get 800. I add the 2600 and the cost right here and get 3975. To get the 497, I divide the 3975 by the 800, and that gives me the average. And then we start selling. So we sold 300 at 497, so I subtract that and subtract that. Then we sold 50 at 497, so I subtract that, so that leaves me 450 in inventory times 497, and I have an ending inventory of 2237, and I have a cost of goods sold of 1739. You plug your numbers over here and make sure you're right. This is, I would say, the most accurate. It has a little more legwork with it, but if I had inventory to run like this, I would use this because it's much more accurate. It gives a very accurate picture of what's going on at the time. So that concludes problem 8.5. I hope you've enjoyed. I've enjoyed talking with you. Have a happy Thanksgiving.